So how you doing, man?
Any better, couldn't stand myself.
Well, hell yeah. Right on. I can already tell I'm an Arkansas boy, so I figure we'll get along pretty splendidly in the same neck of the woods, so to speak, regionally anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Well, hey, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. I had a couple of listeners ask if I would have you come on, so here we are. I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, hey, man, got a few things I'd like to talk to you about today, but man, I kind of know a little about you. I've heard about the foundation that you're involved with and began, and would love to talk with you about that. But like, there's plenty of other cool things that I've read about you and that people have told me about you. That first of all, like, how did you get involved with jiu-jitsu? You're a jiu-jitsu black belt and Special Forces Green Beret. That's a pretty unique combination. So how did you get involved with jiu-jitsu? Was that after you got in the military or what?
Actually it was. So I actually was in the Army. My first enlistment was in 95, and I was a whopping 145 pounds at 6'1". So pretty much everything that I did, and I was going around, and my first duty station was at Fort Hood. That's how I actually ended up in Texas. So I was trying Kuk Sool Won, Taekwondo, traditional karate, like Okinawan karate, Wing Chun, Wing Chun. I mean, every chunky monkey do that's out there. I was trying out and giving it a real shot. I'd be in there for like 6-7 months. I'd train diligently, like 5-6 days a week, first to show up, last to go, because I wanted to give it an honest try. What ended up happening though is that if I found that I was paired up for sparring or whatever that be, that if they were like 180, 185 pounds, if they were bigger than me, then they won. And it didn't even matter about skill level or anything. It was just, overpowered strength. And so I was like, you know what, this ain't going to work, and try something else. And so after about 5, the Wing Chun was the last thing I tried before I tried the Brazilian ground fighting. And they had us catching like paper, for like reflexes. When, you partnered up, some person dropping like a piece of paper and you have to catch it before it falls to the ground. And so I was like, yeah, this is kind of a waste of my time. Not saying I'm too good for it, but I'm too good for it. But it's something I can do at home. I just didn't need to train at a dojo for that. And so the person I started out with, it was actually teaching behind the bleachers of the rec center. And still, and there was remember those old school blue fold out mats?
Oh yeah.
The gymnastic ones. Yeah, those are the ones that we used, and we just kind of used the Velcro to keep them together. Every once in a while, one of us would get hit in the head with a basketball. And my instructor was a blue belt. So keep in mind though, this is at the time. So this is 97. There was only one black belt in the state at the time. So that was Carlos Machado.
What state are you in at this time? Are you in Texas?
Oh yes, sorry, I was in Texas. And so at that time, especially in this area, in the state, if you were a blue belt, you already had like one up, and you were legitimately sought after as a legitimate instructor. Because I mean, it's 2 years more than what anybody else has. So you're already 2 years ahead of the curve. Around that same time was when they were doing the VHS tapes. If you bought like the whole series, you get your black belt, through the mail. It wasn't even online. But they literally had like 2 VHS tapes for white belt, 2 for blue belt, 2 for purple, 2 for brown, 2 for black. And then you'd get like a, signed off certificate, saying that you're a legitimate one. So people like to give, the Gracies, like shit for the, what's it called? Not Gracie Online, but their promotion system that, they can get it online. But
Yeah.
Carlson Gracie was doing that like a decade and so more, even before that. I don't know if that's something that's still practiced or not. I doubt it. But at the time that was something that was kind of like popping up here and there. So I got in there, and my, I literally showed up because this is all I had. It was a short sleeve gi. So it was literally like a black top, but short sleeve. And I had like the patches on there looking like Cobra Kai, and, walked in with my orange belt. So I was feeling, and I earned it, so, or at least I paid for it. So I'm going to get some use out of it. And, I went with a guy named Peter Torres, who was he was really strong for his size. He was about 125 pounds though. So I outweighed him by like 20 pounds. I'm like, finally, this is my time. I'm going to turn the heat on. I'm going to smash this guy. Nope. Literally went 5-6 minutes with the guy rolling. And he tapped me out with just a very basic armbar from the guard repeatedly. I just asked him, like, how did you do that? This was like, it's just still at the point where you don't have any outside influences. You don't have TV, internet, everything else. It's literally like just happening in front of you. And it's like magic almost. Somehow he got his body in position to hyperextend my arm, and couldn't do anything about it. There's nothing. And he literally just said, I've only been here 2 weeks. It's the only thing I know. That was it. That was literally like where I was going to stick with it from that point on. And everything just evolved from there. I became so enthralled with the sport and so addicted to it that I just couldn't get enough. I was driving up to Austin when I was living. So after I get out my first enlistment, I went into the reserves. I was going to school down at Southwest Texas State University in San Marcos, and I was driving about an hour and some change to Austin so I could train with that same guy. And so 3.5 hours where I was going to school full time, during the week was getting old. So after 1 year at Southwest Texas State, or now it's Texas State University, I moved up to Dallas area, actually Arlington. I was going to school at UTA, and it was 45-minute drive was a lot better. So it was a lot easier. And I ended up, moving up to Arlington so I could train more with Carlos Machado. And I stuck with him for 13 years.
Wow. So I was reading online. Is that your connection with Chris Howder? You've trained with him quite a bit over the years as well?
So the connection with Chris Howder was actually very strange. I never met Chris until 6 years ago. Maybe even 5 years ago. We've known each other, like the same circle of friends, for decades, but we never connected. Like, I knew who he was, and we had the same circles of friends going back very long time, because he's been in the sport since the mid 80s. So he got his black belt the year after. So he got his black belt. So he was like 1 year as a black belt, and he got his black belt in 96. I started in 97. So just he was, getting his black belt, I was starting out. But in comparison to most people, this is my dates go back pretty far. But we had the same circle of friends. So it was really, when we actually linked up, it was the World Championships in Vegas. And we just couldn't stop talking. It was like catching up over 20 years of things that, oh, you were there, I was there too, different things. And just the mentality, his integrity, those were the things to me that really, really stuck out. And in a modern sport where the tradition is already kind of hanging by a thread, the true meaning of integrity, not necessarily loyalty, as long as your electronic funds transfer, your paycheck's making it for tuition every month. We're going past that, as in someone who developed a relationship with you over a year of training, and you have a mutual respect as a student and as a teacher student, and vice versa. That's the loyalty that I'm talking about, not necessarily with money. And he has a very, it's unshakable integrity. And that was definitely the missing link, I think, that I was having with everyone that I had in the past. They're good people, don't get me wrong, and I'm not saying anything negative, but that was definitely something that stood out as that one thing to kind of get me locked in, basically. And so I honestly now have that bond with him through jiu-jitsu, and I'm good. I'm staying put and, combat base and staying under Chris. He's just a great instructor, a great guy all around. So it'll be easy to stick around.
And he, I've never met him either. It's kind of like with what you're saying. One of my really good friends, Jack Toffer, is pretty good friends with Chris, and they've done seminars together and have trained together a ton. Jack lives out in LA, but he was recently on one of my instructors' podcast here in Arkansas. But it's just like the same thing. I've never got to be on the mats with him. Actually, I think I might have been on the mats with him when Hickson was promoted. I don't know if he was there or not.
He might have been.
I was at that seminar. So I was drilling with Hickson when that went down. He was like using me to show, and I look up and I see all like the royalty basically, and I'm like, oh, what's going on here? Oh, that's Fabio Santos and Pedro Sauer. It was just a who's who walking down the aisle. So it was a super surreal experience. But there were so many people there. Eddie Fivey, Jack, that it was just like people I'd run into and knew and was catching up with, and it was an awesome event. But it's like what you're saying, I've talked with Eddie Fivey several times, but that was the first event that I met him at,
Yeah.
So, but man, that is awesome. Jiu-Jitsu forges awesome relationships like that. Yeah, you made a remark on competition, like sidebar on that. Like, what are your thoughts on competitor jiu-jitsu?
Not to be difficult, but what aspect are you talking about? Like
IBJJF.
Okay.
But like, okay, you kind of mentioned like tradition versus, this is the narrative that I've heard a lot of people from the generation of guys we're talking about and beyond make remarks about. I've competed quite a bit in IBJJF and over all the belts. And man, now I just like doing all subs and stuff. So like I like competition rules less. I like training for I train people. I still have students to compete myself. I own an academy. But my views on it have changed quite a bit over the years. So I'm always interested in getting somebody's perspective on that.
So I started competing IBJJF in 2000. I was a blue belt. My first competition was the Pan Ams they had in Orlando, in Florida. And this is when there was like 2 major, tournaments a year, and you had to fly to them. And either they were in California, most of them were in California, and then every once in a while they'd have them at different various places. But they weren't like Masters Worlds. Now every year it's in Vegas. If you're going to go to Pan Am's, it's going to be in Long Beach. It's at the Pyramid. They're not doing that anymore. Or excuse me, they're not doing it where they're moving around anymore. Kind of missed that, but So the way that the sport has evolved in IBJJF is, I guess the only two issues that really kind of get me rub me wrong with the IBJJF is one, the organization itself. There's a few things that I feel could be done differently, but you can't really expect much to be done as long as it stays as it is. And in the aspects of, it's a privately owned entity. So, and they're not hiding it. It's not something that's, they're being sneaky about, but there is no board that's, you do it our way or leave. That's it. And I think, well, my opinion on it is they have, it's not necessarily the people, or it's not the organization, it's the people that make the tournament. So you could say you have the best in the world at any tournament, and that would promote it up. For the longest time, there were, you had to pay to get in. And in the last 10 years, maybe a little bit less, that's changed. And I think that's great because it's giving, where they had the monopoly on it. A lot of people don't believe me when I say this, but you can ask people, especially if you're American competing at the 2000 Pan Ams in Orlando, you had to stand in line to get your weigh-ins. They had two scales for Americans or non-Brazilians.
Full segregation.
And you had two scales in a separate room for Brazilians. Those guys never waited in line. We waited in line. I waited in line that year for like 9 hours. I'm not kidding. And there was a couple of fights because people were trying to cut in line, and people have been kind of standing in line for 4 hours already. So it was very disorganized, very expensive. And it was blatantly obvious that there was bias. But I understand, they're growing and so forth. The issues that I have now, more than anything else, is like, for example, if you want to go coach there, you want to get your certification for the rules, they'll have that. So I was going every year, even though it's good for 2 years, just go over there every year, make sure that you have an understanding how they're applying the rules this year, and you're caught up, something changes, or they have like questions, I can bring it up. Well, the last one I went to, they had two rule changes, major ones, in like January. And in June and in August, they added more. So they added like a couple more in June, a couple more August. Well, if I just did the rules meeting in January and you're changing the rule set within the same year, well, what's the point of doing all this? Because now you said that these are the rules, but you're changing halfway through the same year. You're not saying it's taking over next year, but they did some serious rule changes. For example, white belts weren't allowed to wrist lock anymore. But they could do estima locks. So they're trading one for the other. And they did that literally in it was like a June, August type switch. It was about 4 or 5 years ago. And then the referees that they have, they're not on the same page either. So it doesn't seem like what I'm saying holds a lot of, it doesn't really hold water for that until you think about what it takes to get there. So it's a private tournament. That means you're paying for your own flight. You're paying for your hotel. You're paying for your travel. You're paying for your food. You're paying for the tournament. You're paying for your membership. And then you get there, and according to the rules meeting that you had attended, they said this is legal, and then it's illegal and you get disqualified. And there's no way of contesting it. It's a private organization, so take it or leave it. The way that referees were intimidated, you had guys that, if you're going to be wrong with confidence, the way I say it, but make sure that you understand that, okay, I messed up here. This is what I should have done. Learn it, move on. But make sure that you have a good understanding of what you needed to do and move forward, understand you made your mistakes, and then be done. So, and again, it's everyone's saying, oh, it's individual, it's not the organization, but I've seen it way too much where it's the organization's employees. And if it's happening widespread, then it has to be the organization because they're the ones that's setting the standard. So that was probably my biggest thing is the, refereeing, intimidation by the referees, or excuse me, from, like, for example, we had a guy that was a blue belt, got a guy and it was actually a really good knee bar. Well-known, very well-known, famous jiu-jitsu fighter comes out and, tells him, no, that was a sweep. That wasn't a knee bar. And the guy's like, really? But it looked like a knee bar. He's like, no, it just looked like a knee bar. And he tapped from a knee bar, but it wasn't a knee bar. It was a sweep. So he drops down the other guy's hand, raises up the other guy that got disqualified, and he ended up going into the next match, ended up winning. There is no contesting that whatsoever. And again, not a big deal. Move on. Okay. But when you're spending $3,500 to get there and then you get screwed over or something like that, and it's not the first time, it's happening over and over again, that's where I feel that it really starts to have an impact. And it's been happening so often, and they've kind of been brushing it off so much that their empire is starting to crumble back down. You have all these organizations like Seth Daniels set up the Fight to Win, and it's a great way of putting the art itself on the podium, where you don't have 20 people that you're shuffled around in a tournament, and everyone's going at the same time. You have a referee that's looking over the other mat instead of that one. All eyes on you. It's a great format. Not that tournaments, every once in a while, terms could be fun. And that's the bad decisions make great stories. So usually when you go to these trips, ever since like 2000, we have some story of somebody jumping off the roof into a pool. So it's not that it's not fun. Don't get me wrong. We always find ways, and you always have good stories coming out of it. But when you're talking about the IBJJF, the organizations specifically, that's where I find it's the biggest problems. The rules set, not just changing, but it's not even a show of the art itself. It's how well can you play the rules. So now we're not only rewarding for the say this without coming across the wrong way. We are rewarding for the mere attempt of a submission. So it doesn't have to be a submission where you slap it on, okay, that's the win. Now it is, if you try, you actually get advantage points. So once they see they're up on that, now it's, how long can I bend these rules, manipulate these rules to my advantage where I can run the timeout? Mm-hmm. And it's just becoming more and more like that, where it doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you're on top of the podium, that's what matters. And so it's taken away. My biggest thing was my coaches used to get so frustrated with me because I didn't care about time. I didn't care about points. I didn't care about anything except the submission. And I wasn't a smart competitor, meaning I'd be up on points. I'd have like 7 seconds left and I am digging in for a choke. Like, I will not let this go. And I end up getting the submission 3 seconds before the end of the match. And my coach that I had at the time was like, what are you doing? Yeah. You didn't need to do that. You didn't need to have this. You didn't need to have that. You're already up. I was like, yeah, but I didn't win. And it's one of those things where if you're not that mentality, it's hard to explain. If I win on points, it's just, damn it. Yeah, I won technically, but not really. The win, in my opinion, is when they cannot continue anymore and you force them to submit in one way or the other. I've actually had a couple of matches end with, just takedowns. They just landed wrong, or I managed to do it really right, and timing was on my favor. Crack some ribs, whatever it might be, or a knockout. I had one knockout in my it was Miami Open in 2013. I think I don't want to take the credit for the only knockout submission or knockout win in a jiu-jitsu tournament. But so try to imagine this. I'm inside his name is Giancarlo Valdez from the Dominican. Really super nice guy, strong as fuck. But he had this nasty half guard, and so I'm trying to pop my knee out and rotate in my hip, and I was trying to bring my arm over his head so I can hook his shoulder, so I can start weighing down that top arm. And just as I swing my hips and I rotate my arm, he sits up to get the his arm underneath mine. So as he raised up, I went down and I caught him with my elbow, and he just went out. So I'm moving around, and all of a sudden I just see his legs just collapse, and he's not pushing on me anymore. So I'm looking over, and I'm just like, whoa, he's out. Oh shit. So I'm looking at the ref, ref's looking at me because what happened? So he looks down, and then he started coming to, and he was like, okay, I'm good. And we start going again. And I was like, cool, let's keep going. And the referee stopped us. He was like, no, he was already out. And so even though we were both kind of disappointed on that, kind of walked away laughing, but that was my knockout. I actually saw him last year, went to Dominican with my wife, and went out there and we finished the match finally. So it took 7 years, but we actually ended up finishing the match. So it went really well.
And that's awesome. 1 year at Purple Belt, similar story, is what you were hitting on earlier at Pans. I competed, and I had a guy in a straight ankle lock, right? And he turned and spun and tapped all in one instance, and then I got the DQ for a knee bar, right? Right. But I was just like, I never had him in a knee bar position. I never applied hip pressure or anything, right, with on that part of his leg. And he really didn't even spin too well out of the ankle lock, to be honest. But Bernardo Patel is this guy that he's trained with him over the years, and he was there, and he's like, dude, you got the tap. Congrats, man. Great. And I was like, dude, I got DQ'd, Bernardo. This sucks. But I spent a ton of money, a ton of time. And that was a first round at Pans 1 year. And I was just like,
and that's it. That's the end of it. So you get one shot at that, which again, single elimination, you're going in understanding that. So there's no surprise. But that sting, there's no, so for example, in judo, you can raise up, you're like, I want to contest this. So they bring in 2 other referees, they look at the video, and they make the decision off that.
That blew my mind, the first judo tournament I went to. That was great. Yeah.
So that is the difference between a privately owned organization that is for profit, because they don't want to have contesting. So there are people contesting calls, because that would slow everything down, and they're trying to push everyone through. That's again why it's single elimination. If you're doing it more for the sport, you put more time into that. For example, 3 referees or a board of referees that are actually there for specifically that. So this year, so one thing I can really appreciate is, especially about judo, is when they actually do the rules, it's done for a decade, and they have a board meeting, and it's with all the people that are there, all the representatives from different regions, and they all have a say. It's a vote. On top of that, it's not going to be a surprise. Oh, by the way, last month they changed this, so you're not going to get a Shido if you, cup the leg instead of grab the leg. So you can do that now. that would be detrimental to the sport, and they see that. Jiu-jitsu is just overlooked, and especially in like those major tournaments, they're like, yeah, whatever. But that's one thing I actually really like about judo, is the and constantly pushing the pace. So there is no advantage. I almost got a throw, so I should be getting points. Nah, bitch, you fucking either got to throw or you don't. It's not like a halfway through, that's bullshit, I would make the comparison like, I almost got a submission, but you actually do get credited points for almost a submission. So this year, I actually, last year I had, half the year I was just dealing with surgeries. I had shoulder surgery in June. September, I had neck surgery, long overdue, but I've been trying to regain that. I was supposed to compete at Judo Nationals in May and do this whole COVID thing. Everything got postponed. So I was supposed to actually be in Daytona, but they postponed it and rescheduled. So now they're actually going to have it here in Dallas, in Irving, on the 22nd of November. So I think that'll probably be my only competition this year, and trying to get back into jiu-jitsu next year.
I didn't even know that you were involved with judo. How long have you been training judo?
Let's see. I got my black belt from Sina Haddad to 2017, 2 years. I'd say about 4 or 5 years, but judo mainly for jiu-jitsu. It wasn't until like about the last 2 years that I got into it for judo for judo, excuse me. And got really fortunate. So the guy I was training with, Sina Haddad, he has Ironside Martial Arts in Bedford. He's about an hour and 15 minutes away. So twice a week, that's 3 hours at a time, driving there, driving back. It just became very difficult to make. And the only opportunities I had was twice a week. And so that was very difficult. So locally, there's a place called Eastside Dojo, and they hired on he's a bronze medalist in London for, his name is Niyamotra Sandragal, from the Mongolian national team, but he took bronze in London. And for some reason, his style just really fueled my want to be in judo. It was much more aggressive. It's very unorthodox. So it's not your typical kind of Japanese or Western style judo. It was very much Russian influenced and Soviet influenced from during like the leg grab time frames, where they had a lot of whether it be like Mongolian wrestling or Sambo influence or wrestling influence, they incorporated that into it. And I got hooked, and just being that white belt again, is that whole new feeling that you get, that rush, where you get to absorb more, and you're like, oh, I'm a new fresh sponge, a little bit older, but yes, and it's a hell of a challenge. I mean, it's a very hard sport, and not just the physical sense, but the technical aspect of it. It's simple, or it's simple. It's not easy, if that makes sense. So the end goal is very simple. Just trying to put him on his back, but it's not easy because there's so many different things that you have to keep in mind. You have to, the timing and the force, and then you have an opponent doesn't want to cooperate. And matter of fact, doesn't want to cooperate to the point where they actually want to do the same thing to you. But I'm really enjoying it. I know my students are at my place. They're really enjoying the judo aspect for jiu-jitsu. So it's blending in well. It really is.
Have you added like a judo specific class to your academy, or do you just integrate it just for jiu-jitsu?
So any one of my students, they know I kind of like developed a reputation for myself. I used to actually punish anyone who did guard pulling. So like if you pulled guard in class, 25 burpees. If you did it in competition, it was 100. To the point. Yeah. BJJ Eastern Europe actually put a meme with me, and the funny part is that they took the picture, and yes, it was regarding guard pulling, but that was kind of like the funny part, because you never know. But there's a kid asking me, like literally asking me for strategy points, and he's like, so I'm gonna pull guard, I'm gonna do this. I'm like, you're gonna do what? And they snapped the picture when I was like literally like, what did you say? You said it right to my face. And that's what I was morally surprised about. I was like, are you fucking with me? Are you serious? You know, I don't know what to do. And that's when they snapped it, and they had this whole thing about guard pulling. And I was like, oh man, they caught me on that one. But now I haven't done that to punish anyone for it. Mainly, I think I've become a bit more articulate with my rationale. Why not? Why do you not want to do this? I think it's part of, you know, my advancement as a human and instructor, just Shebaro 6.0, as I like to call it, you know, as you know, the gentler, kindler Shebaro. So how you want to take that? I don't know how. Yeah. So the hard part was coming into teaching full time, being from a special forces background where you don't have any women, no kids. So I was using fucking shit as commas and periods, you know, and then not really having an understanding of the words that I was using with the context and with the people. So it was just no filter type environment. And when you have everyone around you for years that's in the same mindset, and then you come here and you have to watch what you say, the first couple years were tricky, to say the least. So I had to become more business minded. I had to not be as strict with certain things. And I was like super hardcore into this, and I was still in the mentality of, you know, you fuck this up and you're fucking dead, you know, which that's where I came from though, is yeah, if you do fuck this up, then you are dead. That's literally the point, you know? So it was a transition that was definitely needed. I admit it. It came a little bit late, but it still developed into where, you know, I'm still around. I still have students. So I didn't lose too many.
Yeah. I joke around with my students because we had a judo program for a long time, and now we just have pretty much integrated to the BJJ class. But I joke, I'm like, guard pulls, you mean failed sacrifice throws? Right.
So Chris likes to call it a tactical retreat. I still am not in there with it, but you know, it's better than saying guard pulling, I'll tell you that. And he tries to hide it in like a tomonagi. So it's yeah, I get it. It's not really pulling guard. There's some offense to it, but at the same time, I know where you're getting at. I know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, that is sacrifice. Those are even frowned on by a lot of judo elitists I've talked to over the years. Is, you know,
yeah,
like, we don't do those here, you know.
Yeah.
So, well, man, let me ask you this: at what point did you kind of go down the path of joining the military and begin to fuse all this together into what we're seeing today?
So that happened actually in 2004. So I was full-time into jiu-jitsu. I was going to school full-time. And after 9/11, I really, my own, my priorities changed, definitely. I was definitely in the mindset of, because my first enlistment and, you know, being in the military for already at that time, this was 6 years. I there's nothing going on though. So that was the thing. It was being in the military, no war going on. So all you're doing is just training for no purpose. And now there was a purpose, and I wanted to be part of that purpose. The problem is that with my my reserve unit that I was in, I already signed a contract literally in July for the current MOS, for the military occupational specialty, the job that I was in, and I just literally just re-enlisted for another 4 years or 5 years as a drill sergeant. And so they wanted to send me up to Oklahoma for 2 years to train more troops because there's an influx in troops during wartime. And I wasn't fucking having that. I was I was a little shit about it. I was very, very belligerent, but I was basically, if I'm not going to have my way, then you're going to have to kick me out. You know, then I can go my way. Fortunately, there was a commander that showed up, you know, country. One of those guys that still use chaw, you're in Arkansas, you know what I'm talking about. But he would literally have to dump out like his trash can like halfway through the day because it was like getting full. I mean, it was just bad. But he basically was able to give me a sit down and release me from that unit. And he was just like, listen, you fucked this up. You're coming back and you're going to give me double the time. I was like, it's fair. You know, no problem. So I joined, it was a National Guard unit in Mississippi because I had to do a lateral transfer due to the situation I was in. And I was driving out there. It was like 8-hour drive one way. And they basically were trying to put me through a series of tests before they sent me to SFAS, which is Special Forces Assessment and Selection. So it's basically a gut check for 3 weeks, doing different things, everything from different obstacle courses and different events that they during team week and single events. And it's basically something where they're going to run you down a very high attrition rate just to kind of weed out everybody that's not supposed to be there. Been waiting for 9 months. I kept going to the same drills. Kept proving myself, but the issue was they didn't have any dates. So I went to where I was training. I was training with Travis Luter at the time, and I was his training partner. This is right before he got into like UFC, and then he got into the Ultimate Fighter. So the manager for him and Matt Serra at the time was got actually. I'm still involved with now. He's an attorney. And he only had Travis Luter and Matt Serra. And both of them won the Ultimate Fighter. And then both of them actually had a title shot. Matt Serra ended up being GSP at the time. And Travis didn't make weight. So that was, but they both got title shots.
Yeah, I remember that. Travis Luter was like, didn't he have a bad problem making weight with like Anderson Silva and like was like
that was it.
Yeah,
that was a title shot. Yeah, and he was only like 1.5 pounds over or something like that, but
he looked dead. Oh my god.
Yeah, he was so pale.
Didn't he take his back in the fight? Didn't they fight and he took his back, right?
He took him down and got full mount.
Okay, full mount.
And
that's what it was.
He was so drained though. He just couldn't finish that out. Very unfortunate, man, because I mean, I was actually physically there for, him, getting ready for all this, and water under the bridge. But so basically I was running out of money. I was running out of time, and I had to make a decision. Either I go pro in MMA or I go in SF. So I was literally like a couple of weeks away. I was trying to make the decision, and I was actually leaning toward going MMA. And I finally got a call from the unit saying, okay, we got your selection date. Do you want to go? So now I had green light for both, and I had to weigh in like what I want to do. What are the options? So I ended up going to SF. So there was 458, I believe. That started in that 3-week selection process. Out of the 458, 152 made it. And then that lets you, gives you the opportunity to do the Special Forces qualification course, which is the next part of it, which is, small unit tactics. They have language training. They have SEER, which is a survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. Basically a series of schools that lasts on average, depending on the language, of course, on average about 16 to 18 months. And if you're a medic and you have like a very difficult language, then you could be there for over 2 years. So out of the people that when I started selection, there was 158. Out of that 158 that started the Q course that actually graduated to get their Green Beret, there was 31 of us. So only 30 people out of the 458 after those 2 years of training. So now you can see, like, have an understanding of the attrition rate that goes through and how much time goes through on that. But I got really lucky while I was actually in the Q course. I noticed guys that were doing jiu-jitsu and kind of jumped over there and just kind of helped them out here and there. And they ended up being in the unit that I ended up going to. So it was real, got really fortunate there. And
what rank were you at
really
this point in jiu-jitsu? Sorry.
So I got my black belt in 2004, September 2004. And I left shortly after that to North Carolina. And I'm moving there. So I was the only black belt in the Army, I believe. And I was the first black belt in Special Forces Regiment history. Ended up going to there. And so I ended up in it's a different type of unit than traditional Special Forces. So the unit that I ended up going to, it was called a CIF, which is Commanders in Extremis Force. So I was there initially as an assaulter, and then I went to advanced schools and shooting schools and sniper school. So I was an assaulter and a sniper for this unit, which is counterinsurgency and counterterrorism, where we specialize specifically in direct action and hostage rescue missions.
Wow. Yeah, that's an incredible, what was some of the things about the process you went through to get selected? I mean, what was it that, you make it seem like such an easy thing that you became a group. I know you're it's weird for me to answer questions about myself too. And I didn't even do anything great, but like you had to go through some serious shit to get to that point, right? Like what was some of the physical, mental stuff you went through?
So like selection, which is the first 3 week, which is kind of like the gut check, the first couple of days, they're yelling at you. You do log PT, which is, you see that very commonly on the beach, with the SEALs. They have the telephone pole, they're bringing it over. It's a very common thing. So we had that. We had rifle PT, which is, you can imagine it's only like 6-7 pounds, but after 4 hours, it starts to weigh on you. Different team events. And I think the team events psychologically started wearing on you as well as physically, because you had to. So first thing, there was no like learning a skill, then dumping it. We learned a skill like orienteering, where you learn how to read a map and a compass, and that's how you get from point A to point B. So they teach you that, you get tested on that, you make that, and then the third part, which is their team events, you have the entire 3 weeks, you have a ruck on you that's about 65 pounds with water and food. And they have checkpoints every once in a while where they weigh it. So there's no way that you can try to cheat your way of carrying a lighter weight. And you're doing all these events, the telephone pole, different things like that. And the down pilot, which is a duffel bag that weighs over 200 pounds, and you have a stretcher. And so you have to get that down pilot. So you have to navigate your way there, which is 7 miles. And then you have the event itself. And depending on what it is, if it's a down Jeep, then you have to get a 3-wheeled Jeep with maybe a pole and some rope. And they give you certain things, and you have to basically figure out a solution for it, and what would be the easiest way to get it from point A to point B within this amount of time. So there's a lot of like mental strategy that you have to incorporate into it. And especially when you're already worn out, that's where it becomes very challenging. So 7 miles there, 7 miles during an event, or 5 to 7 miles, and then 7 miles to return back. And you had 2 events a day. So yeah, one event is really not that big of a deal. But when you have one event after another, that's where you started having a lot of people drop out. And the part where people didn't realize that was going to really get them was we start out with 12 people and we're all carrying a 1,000-pound telephone pole. Well, distributed between 12 people, that's like 80 pounds. It's not that big of a deal. You can go for a while. But that telephone pole, that doesn't change once you lose parts, guys of your team. So you say you went from 12 people down to 10, down to 8, that telephone pole didn't change. That event distance didn't change. So that's where a lot of people were losing a lot. And it was becoming drastically harder really fast when people were trying to understand that or didn't understand that, and then went out and then like, you know what, we'll manage this. And they had a certain plan and they never changed it. And now they have 8 people instead of 12. Well, it's not going to work the same. You're going to have to, it's going to take longer. You're going to have to shift the weights around. You're going to have a lead man, trail man. They're going to have to switch out. And then you have some guy that's doing navigation. So yeah, that was the stresses on there. But yeah, and then once you actually got into the Q course itself, or actually after the first 2 days where they're yelling at you, it's called a gentleman's course. So they're actually not even going to be yelling at you. They're in the wood lines 50 feet away, and they're just watching from a distance. So if it's stress, then it's self-induced stress. It's not even because of them. And they literally want to see what you're going to be doing on your own. So they test your integrity from the very beginning. So you have some guy that's could be a stud, and he's a shithead to work with. More than likely, he's not going to make it, because SF is actually the one branch where you can peer, other members of your team out. So because they know the instructors can't catch everybody. So you actually have like a voting session at the end. And if you wanted to vote somebody out, that was the opportunity to do it. But it was a vote. And this plays true to a lot of different things. Because you can imagine the primary job for special forces is making, so let's just describe this probably the easiest way. So basically the job of SF goes into hostile territory, enemy behind enemy lines, and they're training foreign troops. And that's why they're called force multipliers. So FID missions are the most common things that you're actually going to do as special forces soldiers. So if you're watching like John Wayne's The Green Berets, they're going in there, they're training the Montagnards in Vietnam, which were like the tribal people, and they teach them in guerrilla warfare. And they're force multipliers. So now you have 12 Americans and you have 100 of the Montagnards that are fighting alongside with you. I never got to do all that cool shit. So foreign internal defense, the FID missions, I never got to do. Everything we did was literally, find a high value target, kick it in the door, taking them in and taking off. Pretty much 95% urban and about 98% night missions. So we owned the night. We had the advantage technology, but it was a very, very small team that did hits very precisely and very methodically and very quickly to get in and out, because on average we'd have 35 to 40 people going out, which is a very, very small element. And because we have to move with speed, we can't carry a lot. So we were armed to the gills for what we got. but we weren't designed to stay in a sustained firefight for a long period of time. That's why I always had like overhead, like Overwatch, like whether it be fixed wing or rotary wing. We always had support with a drone or helicopter or something of the sort above us in case the shit hit the fan and we just needed to call in a bomb or something.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
the pulling guard actually came from deployment. So my first deployment, 2007. So this is 3 years after I had my black belt. Was doing a hit, and the first room we went into, there's always 2 men going in, and so I got in there, and got lucky. Had the guy they were looking for. He's about 160 pounds, soaking wet. So I zip tied him, and I was putting pressure on his hip from behind, and shots went off upstairs. Right away, I looked over to my right, and I saw the guy that was the guy on my team, just making sure he was okay. And just had a reaction, the guy that I was pinning down. And keep in mind, I was an assaulter at the time, so I was weighing about 250 pounds. And
you went from 145 to 250 by this time.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, a big change. I actually had someone that I trained with at Fort Hood that I saw again at Fort Bragg, and he introduced himself, and we trained together for like 2 years, but he didn't recognize me. But that Iraqi that we had, the Al-Qaeda member, was he bucked up, and with my plate carrier, my Glock, my shotgun, M4, full round mags, breacher tools like the Thor hammer and a Hooley tool, water, explosive charges. I weighed probably about 320 pounds. So my knee, and I know how to move on the ground. So me doing like a knee on his, shoulder neck area to keep him pinned down. I know how to move. I way stronger, way heavier. And when he bucked, all the weight that I had on me, I started to fall backwards. And so because I have like flashbangs that were like right on my chest plate, that they were held together with rubber bands because we need to go in there and go fast. So kick in a door and, rip out a flashbang, which is like, if you can imagine, like shotgun shells inside of like a cylinder tube. We had like 9 bangers, which is, imagine 9 shotgun shells in there. And it was just held by rubber bands. So we would just rip off the rubber band, pull the pin, and throw it in. But it's very easy if somebody has their hands tied behind and they could just rake across the chest line and pull a pin. Well, that would go off right under my chin and I'd be dead. So when he bucked, I was fighting as hard as I possibly could to try to get my balance back, to go back onto my knee and put pressure back down. And what felt like an eternity was literally like a split second. I literally just lost my balance and I just went back forward. But that moment was, it literally like petrified me. I just couldn't imagine like how helpless I'd be, on my back, almost like a turtle on its back. And so, and all you would need, just even blindfolded, with his eyes closed, he could just rake around it and then he can find some pins to pull, So that was the determining moment, was this will never happen to me ever again, and you get into these habits because of what you do the most, so if you are intently, using guard or pulling guard, well, when the shit hits the fan and you have to depend on what, you're going to resort to survive, do you want it to be with your back on the ground on concrete, or jumping into that position? Or would you rather be in a dominant position on top, where you could steer the fight to where you want it to, and be in control? And especially with the amount of variables that happens in a self-defense manner, why wouldn't you want to be on top? And I think that's where it kind of like encapsulated Chris Howder's methodology in mind was get on top, stay on top. You know, rule number 2, refer to rule number 1. You know, so his entire mentality is the same way, you know, that, you know, get on top and stay on top. And that was a very, it's a lesson that I learned that stuck with me for a lifetime that I don't ever want anyone else to go through. And most of the time this is usually the format that I tell that story, and I usually don't even say it in class. But that is actually the reason. So, if we're doing jiu-jitsu and sports jiu-jitsu on the mat, maybe it's 5-6 years before I even get into like some type of fight. I don't even have to know MMA. I don't have to strike. I just need to know that, you know, what I'm doing right now isn't going to put me in a bad situation starting out. So, you know, the first half hour of our class is all takedowns. If it's gi, then we're doing, you know, judo for jiu-jitsu or, you know, variants on that. If it's no-gi, we're doing, you know, wrestling takedowns or maybe some, you know, judo variables for no-gi. But there's every night we're doing takedowns. Every night. And then we're going 30 minutes on stand-up, 30 minutes for instruction, and then, you know, 30 minutes on average to roll. But I had to design it in a way to where if I did have some athletes that wanted to compete, that my methodology would not interfere with that. So, and here's the funny thing about, you know, when I get into these arguments with, or I used to, I don't even care now. People say, oh, I pull guard. What are you going to say about that? Good job. Go out and do great things. Whatever you want to do. I just don't care. If it's my athlete, I'll take the time to actually explain it. But, you know, even the IBJJF, which has these strictest standards, which they also have the, where the most common platform to ride the rules and pull guard is the IBJJF, bottom line. But even the IBJJF, they still reward you 2 points for doing takedowns. Now they're trying to make it harder. I don't know if you noticed that the last few years, they even said, now it's takedown and you have to be in some certain pattern of control, you know, for 3 seconds, which is fine. But and again, I think that's more to benefit the guard pullers. But, you know, we're just going in a direction to where eventually I feel once they actually take away the 2 points for takedowns, or they start awarding points for guard pulling, is the day that I stop doing IBJJF entirely. Like, I won't even be part of the organization whatsoever, or coach or anything. As of right now, personally, the only thing I really want to compete in is Pan Am's Worlds, maybe. But I don't want to take away my my athletes' choice if they want to compete. And so I'm trying to stay in good standing with them best I can and just bite my tongue.
Yeah. Well, man, let's kind of wrap it up with this last line of questions. I do want to talk to you about the We Defy Foundation. Mm-hmm. Do you know Matt Blank?
Yes.
He's out in Tucson. He's just retired Air Force. I want to say he's the very first person I heard mention the foundation, right? And I watched the video recently for the This Is Normal, and it would encourage anybody that's listening to this podcast to watch that, because, man, just the way those stories came across, like, I developed a new level of empathy in at least a couple of areas on just listening to that. It was like 9 minutes long, right? Which I saw that on your website. But where does the name come from? Isn't that from a motto, the We Defy? Where does the background on that, and how did you kind of come up with this, and just the whole shebang, if you can?
So Nous Défions is the motto for the CIF companies. So you have B23, which was Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group. So at each group, they have that designated company. So there's only about like 80 or so operators in that company out of each group that has approximately 2,000. And we operate in different theaters of operation in the world. So you have, for example, like first group CIF, which is Charlie 1-1, and their operational theater of operation is going to be in Asia. And then you have 10th group. And so theirs is going to be primarily, well, they were set up for the Cold War. So they were primarily like in Europe and parts of the stands. You had 5th group, which was mainly the Middle East, 7th group, South America, and Latin countries. So We Defy was taken from, it's actually a very bold, abrasive statement that was used from the French resistance fighters that worked along with the OSS, with the Office of Strategic Services, and the Black Devils, which were the first special service force, which was the basically where all special operations derive from. The OSS is where the CIA and FBI, or that's not FBI, but intelligence operations came from the OSS after they were disbanded, and the first special service force was disbanded as well, and the different military operations, special operations, were created out of that. So We Defy is the direct translation into English of Nous Défions. And it's a very, like I said, a very bold statement, very arrogant statement. You know, it's like in your face type, you know. So Joey Bozic is the other founder, and so he came in. He's a triple amputee, and so he came in my place and was looking for a place for his daughter to train, actually. And his daughter Violet was 6 years old at the time. And we got this talking for like an hour and a half. Come to find out, you know, he was at Fort Bragg. I was at Fort Bragg. There was one of the times he was in the hospital, he was actually like in the same, he was one bunk over from one of the guys that was actually on my team. So small world. And so we got to talking, and I was like, you know, did you ever do martial arts? You know, you ever thought about doing it again? And that was the initial conversation. So a few conversations, fast forward, you know, a few months. And it's like, hey, you know, I've never done this before, but if you're willing to be patient with me, I'll be patient with you, and we can try to set something up, you know, and try to create things out of this. Because I mean, there's you know, a vast amount of opportunity in this, and you know, and this is probably one of the few sports that you can literally shape, mold, create your own version. And so we started doing private lessons, just me and him, just to get comfortable, and just so I could understand what I'm working with. Because at this time I had about 16, 17 years of teaching, coaching, but that's regular people, 4 limbs. Shit. Are you there? Okay.
Yeah,
sorry about that.
Yeah, you're good. I can still hear you.
So he came in, and a couple times a week. And so I had the 8 pages front and back kind of written up as like my notes when I was home trying to figure out. But the difficulty wasn't just in movements, but it was understanding where his base was, understanding where, you know, can he force, you know, off his legs, because they're titanium rods and he's got the muscle flap on top of it. So if he pushes in a certain angle, it's literally like a rod. It's pushing into his muscle, so he can't stay on it. His left hand, he only had 3 functioning fingers, and he can only rotate his wrist so far because, again, titanium rods. His right arm is cut, was amputated right below his elbow. And So out of those 8 pages, I literally had only 2 to work with, but with those 2 was the foundation for it. And we just kept going. So it took about 6 months for him to feel comfortable after working a one-on-one, and he started joining the group class. And after the group class, then he was like, fuck this, I want to compete. And the one thing that I really respected is like, he got into competition and kept the same goals regardless of where his journey was taking him, because he wanted to get into this strictly because, like anybody else, self-defense, like the first thing. But he was like, if I go against an amputee, well, what's the point of me doing this then? Because the reason I'm doing this is to test my skills if my family was attacked. And my family's probably, probably not going to get attacked by another amputee. So I need to learn how to defend myself properly against an able-bodied person. So he refused to, go into any, and not in a disrespectful way, but in a way that they could comprehend, like, listen, I'm doing this because my main priority is to protect my family and myself. And so he competed in IBJJF. He competed in everything he did is against other able-bodied people. And the strange thing is, even his very first competition, he was getting takedown points. He racked up points, where no one thought that was even going to happen. And then, just out of nowhere, I was actually in Belgium teaching a seminar, and he was competing that same weekend, and he got his first win by submission and ended up being on the podium, and I just couldn't be there for that. So, but that happened in 2017. Since then, he loves jiu-jitsu so much. It's the only human being I've known doing this that loves the sport so much that he cut off 10 inches of his leg to make it even. So he had one amputation that was about 10 inches above the knee. The other one was at the knee. And he decided to cut off 10 inches of his right leg to make it even with his left. That's dedication.
Wow.
But
yeah. I've seen him bust an incredible sit through, by the way. I assume he's the only triple amputee competing in IBJJFs, right?
No, actually. Or the triple amputee, yes. But there's another double amputee, a single amputee. There've been a lot more that actually, I think the understanding that, that they can, and that someone has. Can definitely motivate, and I think that was definitely a motivating factor. But just around the time where he started feeling comfortable with the group classes is where we kind of like, it was literally in the corner in here, and he lost like 38 pounds because he was just getting his chair and getting out, and his mental clarity was phenomenal. He got into a routine. He had purpose in life again, and he was excited about coming to class because it's something for him, and it was something that he could do with his daughter. So that was huge for him. And we're like, well, wonder what else, like, how many other people could benefit from this if they even just knew about it. And that's where it actually all spawned, was just tried to have a conversation on the mat after we just got done beating the shit out of each other. And, I wonder if anyone else want to get the shit kicked out of them, But we started realizing, like, how many different benefits if you actually, take a step back and analyze it. You have the mental acuity where you have to, problem solve, and, you literally have to focus in and spend a lot of time and energy just understanding in a dynamic method, the computations and the algorithms that you get into. And so there's a huge mental aspect of it. And that in itself is what distracts you from your daily, everyday grind, or the stresses that you have. Because, just as well as I do, if someone's choking the shit out of you, you're not thinking about your bills. You're not thinking about your boyfriend, girlfriend, or anything. You're thinking, this monkey on my back will not get off, and he's choking the living crap out of me. But in that moment, that's when your stress levels start to actually go down, because you're not worried about the long-term shit that's been bugging you. You're just worried about what's in front of you. And that to me is, it was critical. And then having something, you know, to go back to, and then the release of pheromones that you release while that, you know, and then there's another study about just human touch. And so it was done for like, not yoga, but it was a masseuse in Oregon that actually did a really good study on it. And just because you're constantly pulling and have contact, there's a huge advantages to that as well. And trying to kind of reintegrate into the normalcy in a sense. So the physical benefits, of course, you know, you're doing something as a alpha male or female, you know, you're in that group where you have that same mentality and everyone has a certain goal, and there's organization, there's uniforms, there's so many different similarities to military just in that sense. And then you have, you know, something that you can learn long-term. It's going to be, yes, physically demanding. It's the best way I can put it. But the one thing we wanted to make sure was that it wasn't, we wanted to have a nonprofit that wanted to provide solutions for the combat disabled veteran that was seeking to fix themselves. I know it sounds very simple, but it's extremely important. If you want to better yourself, if you want to get better and you know you have issues, and a lot of us knew we had issues, we just didn't know to what extent, you have to be willing to do something yourself. Jiu-jitsu can be phenomenal, but if you don't show up, it's shit. It doesn't matter. You could just say, yeah, I'm going to be spinning bottles. It doesn't even matter what the event is. If you don't go there, it doesn't matter. So the key thing to this is that we found the combination of we will find a place for you and do all the legwork, making sure they're legit, making sure that they're able and willing to have someone that they recognize, and we're letting them know ahead of time, might have some, you know, mental issues. They might kind of freak out a bit, might have PTS, or they're an amputee. You got to be willing, you know, to work with someone that, you know, it's not just full mount. This is an entirely new algorithm now, because full mount is not full mount. He only has half a leg, so that has to be defended. So there has to be like an alternative method to the training system, and where they can be incorporated into that. And once we actually have that person that we know, or that academy that we know is able and willing to accept them as a student, then we take that veteran, like, okay, we have 3 in your area. They're all approved. Which one would you like to go to? So they get a choice in that. And so they go to that place. We provide 2 gis belt, and unless it's like we haven't had like a 10th mountain, or excuse me, 10th mountain, 10th planet, where it's just spats. So whatever the academy, you know, requires. And, you know, they get to try it for 6 months. If it's, you know, if they've been maintaining their end of the bargain and they're showing up at least 3 times a week, then we extend it for another 6 months, you know, and then we give them like 1 year where they get to, you know, get to enjoy the benefits of jiu-jitsu, you know, while finding a way, not the way, but a way that we have found that's been very successful, you know, cope with their stresses, their daily stresses, and, you know, the things that haunt them, and, you know, just the different things that they might be struggling with.
Yeah. Last question, Alan. How can, well, 2 questions. How can the gyms get into contact with you if they want to go through some sort of an approval process? But also, if gyms are, other black belts or school owners are listening to this, what advice do you have for them that you have learned? I mean, you just went into this you know, and learned. You learned how to put all this together and what to do. What advice do you have for other people who are wanting to help out in their communities with the veterans and law enforcement and stuff like that?
That's actually huge. So when we first started out, there was 5 people involved, and all those 5 people had like 6 hats that they wore. I was VP for 5 years. I was the director. I was assisting the Royal Marine Commandos set up their own system for the British veterans, and so now that's actually going on. It's gained huge amount of support momentum in England, and theirs is called Reorg, which is just a mirror image of We Defy Foundation. And we're currently in the talks with a Australian SAS, which is special operations for Australia, and getting them started in their own as well for their veterans. The website itself, if you're an academy owner and like to get involved, we have, if you want to get your school approved, just go onto the We Defy Foundation.org, and there's a link where you can click on it, and it has we do require certain things, like you have ADA approved bathrooms, things like that, in case you get an amputee, so you can take them all. Once we kind of get that the paperwork thing done and add you to that, currently I think we have over 400 associations now that are We Defy approved.
Wow.
And I think we had like over 250 athletes that we actually put through the program so far. And it takes an average of $2,000 per year per veteran. So if you think about that, for every seminar that we do, we get, an average, $3,500 to $5,000. So that's like 2 veterans you can help out, for the year. So we have over 300 volunteers now, which has been incredible. We had, it's always odd to me looking on social media and then seeing, We Defy ambassador. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? They've been with the program for like a year, but it's grown so large that I honestly don't know everybody in there. Which is the crazy part, because we started out literally with 5 people in the same spot. I actually stepped down for at my as a VP and a board member. I'm still doing seminars, just doing more like the founder thing with Joey. But it was just taking up way too much time, and I was getting burned out. So now I handed that over to we have a whole new staff that's taken over, and they're doing phenomenal things. They're taking it to that next level where it needs to go. So I couldn't be happier. Everything's really going well. We're getting a lot more people in. We're managing the wait list. It got up to like 500 people on the wait list at one point, which was it was horrible. But we managed to, fix everything and get everyone, and to a point where they're not waiting, as it was before, like a couple of years, because the program, skyrocketed, but we didn't have any funds to support it. And so there we had a lot of problems because of that, but we managed to fix all those issues that we had, and the guys that are on there right now are doing just an incredible job, and best time to probably jump in because we don't have any of those issues anymore.
Yeah, and
so
people can donate on your website if they choose.
Yes.
Correct, I saw. So that's great.
That's 100% goes into support the veterans. So the board doesn't get paid. I don't get paid. Joey doesn't get paid. All the money that we make, we turn it back around right to them. Now there's always costs. Like, for example, we have to, we're making gis or making rash guards. We have to pay for that, of course, and then we turn around and sell them. But, the overhead cost that we have is extremely minimal. We're trying to keep it that way as long as we can.
Fantastic. I'm gonna when I share this, I will include some links in the description on the YouTube videos and stuff. Man, this has been a great talk, Alan. I appreciate your time. I know we've gone a little over than what I told you to budget for, and we had some technical difficulties, man, but the stories are amazing. So I really do appreciate you taking the time. I was looking forward to talking to you all week, and I look forward to getting it out, sharing it with everybody.
Thank you. I
All
appreciate
right,
it.
Have a wonderful day. I'll reach out when I get this uploaded.
Okay. Thank you so
All right,
much.
man. Thank you.
Take care.